Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Chapter 2 is about ecology. Now, when people think of biology as a science, they usually don't think of ecology. They think of dissecting frogs or something like that. But ecology is a subset of the biological sciences. To me, it's quite fun. And it's interesting aspects of biological sciences. This chapter is a little heavy-duty chapter in a way, so kind of divided into chunks. We won't cover it in one sitting, I think, so we'll divide maybe into two parts or something like that. So there are 5 actually major topics that are discussed in this chapter. First is that we have to define for ourselves so we understand what is actually ecology. What does that even mean? Second, we're going to talk about biospheres and stuff called biotic and abiotic factors in an environment. And then we're going to delve right into more details of what ecology is at an individual organism level, at population, community, ecosystem, and biosphere levels. So these terms will inshallah become quite comfortable in a little bit. And fourthly, how organisms obtain their energy in ecological systems. And finally, cycles that occur in nature, carbon cycle, etc. So it's a pretty heavy-duty chapter, kind of jam-packed, but inshallah, one at a time. So what is ecology? If you read old historical books of sciences, they used to call it natural history. Natural history it's a bit of an older term, and it was kind of like science before it got various different specialties in it. So, like Newton was a natural historian and Darwin was a natural historian. They were just scientists anyway. But the term natural history has come to imply nowadays as the study of the nature, a study of animals and plants in an environment, and a big picture study of the animals and plants in their environment. And ecology specifically is defined as study of interactions between organisms and their environment. So in other words, when a particular organism, whether it be a fly or a deer or a human being, is not divorced from its environment, right? It interacts with the environment. It interacts with the environment, plus it also interacts with other organisms, etc. And that is what is studied in ecology. This is British Natural Museum history. We've been here actually, if you remember. It's a very beautiful place in London, and it's a very amazing place because the British Empire, ruled 25% of the world at one time, and they have acquired a lot of artifacts of natural science. So the Natural History Museum typically are about animals, organisms, and their environments. The dinosaur bones, for things, will be found in the Natural History Museum, whether it be London or it be Chicago Natural History Museum, because it's natural history is a term that used to the science of living things in their environment. So now, as an introduction to the topic, for example, here, what does a coyote eat? Yeah, here's a picture of a coyote with the eyes blacked out. So what does a coyote eat? I wonder, is it eat like grass, or does it eat like little rabbits, or what? And you say, who really cares? But that's okay. They're not going to be a biologist. But if you're somebody has a curious idea, so studying what a coyote eats is studying that organism, right? It's the way it interacts with its environment. And here's another question. How does the day length influence plant growth or bird migration? See, birds migrate. The birds are able to sense that the day length is decreasing, and which causes them to migrate. It's for that reason. So they have this intuitive sense of the length of day. And if you don't know, bird migration patterns are quite specific. It means like they take the same route every year, in and out, in and out, in and out, almost as if they have own highways mapped across the globe. Why is that? Why they migrate, how they migrate, and where they migrate. All of these are studying organisms in their interaction with the environment. So these are the topics that an ecologist would be interested in and curious about, how animals, living things, interact with their environment, right? So ecology, therefore, is the study of living things and how they interact with their environment, okay? Now we're going to talk about the second part of it, okay? Now, this term biosphere you probably have heard before. See, if you dig a big giant hole in the earth, after a while, if you go down the crust about 1.4 miles down, there's no life going to be there because it's just so hot. It's like lava, right? Not even bacteria. There's nothing going to be alive. It's so hot. The Earth's core is as hot as the surface of the sun. So it's pretty hot. So there's no living things beyond the Earth's crust. You dig deep enough, then you're going to run out of place where living things are able to survive. So not all of Earth, whether its surface or the atmosphere, is able to sustain living things, right? So the parameters of living things, right, how when life is able to be sustained with all this variation, okay, living things are very limited. So about 11 miles up from ground and about 1.4 miles below, as you can see over here, is all the part of Earth, atmosphere and Earth's crust, where you will find living things. If you go beyond that, there's no bacteria floating in space. It can't live. It's freezing. It is not, yeah? So living things are restricted to the Earth's atmosphere and the Earth and the crust of the Earth, right? If you dig deep enough, there are all kinds of living things. There's bacteria, there's worms, there's all this kind of stuff, right? So a good deal of life exists beneath our feet, but not too deep, okay? So biosphere is the portion of Earth that supports living things. This includes the atmosphere and the oceans. The biosphere, the sphere, bio meaning life, the life-sustaining sphere of the Earth is that part of atmosphere and that part of crust and that part of ocean that is able to sustain life, okay? So that's what that means. And beyond the biosphere, there's no life on Earth, okay? So that's the term biosphere, and that is about 12.4 miles altogether. Most of it in atmosphere and some of this Earth crust. Okay, about 12.4 miles is biosphere. Now, the environment, therefore, the biosphere is that part of Earth's environment, that part of Earth and that part of environment that's able to sustain life. If you look at the environment, like this picture over here, it can be divided into two factors, into two different parts. That's pretty easy enough. It's either this or it's either that. There's no third option. It's not true false type of question, right? So, and all of the environment can be divided into what are called biotic factors and abiotic factors, okay? So biotic factors and abiotic factors, okay? What does that mean? So living things are affected by non-living things and other living things in an environment, see? Biotic factors are all the living things in an environment. For example, the grass that you see here, that's biotic. It's living, right? If there's a deer here, the fact that there is grass there is a cause for celebration, right? Because how else would the deer be able to live in an environment with no grass and no thing? So that's a biotic factor. On the other hand, water, which is not living, it's abiotic. It's not living, but it's also essential for the survival of living things. So it's not that an organism needs only other living things. It needs some biotic factors, which are living things factors, and abiotic factors, which are not living things in the environment that is still important for the survival of the organism. So living things are affected, so any particular living thing is affected by what surrounds it, whether it be non-living things or other living things. So abiotic factors are non-living aspects of an organism's environment. Okay, for a rodent or coyote or deer, everything in its environment that's not living is called an abiotic factor, but it doesn't mean it's trivial. It's actually very important. For example, air, That's abiotic factor. Try living without oxygen for a few minutes. You follow? It's an abiotic factor. Air is an abiotic factor. Air currents are abiotic. Temperature in the environment is abiotic factor. Moisture in the environment. Precipitation in the environment. Light is an abiotic factor. Soil is an abiotic. These are all non-living things, but they are still important for the optimal survival of a living thing. So these are abiotic factors. Okay? Then here's an example. Well, here's an example when there's a scarcity of an abiotic factor, water. If you don't have water, you have drought. Look at the difference between these two pictures, right? No water, trouble. Water, green grass, animals happy. See, yeah? So abiotic factors are very important. Biotic factors, on the other hand, are all living organisms that inhabit an environment. So in a particular environment, all the living things, such as bees, trees are living, rabbits, and whatever. These are examples of biotic factors, and examples of abiotic factors. Examples are, as you can see, so they're both important, okay? So far, this is what we have done. Pretty good. We define what ecology is. It's the study of how living things interact with the environment and other living things. And we define what a biosphere is. That is that aspect of Earth's atmosphere and the Earth's crust and the oceans that is able to sustain life. We define what biotic and abiotic factors are so far. Now we're going to talk about ecology proper. How do we understand species? How do we understand an organism? Okay. For example, if you look at this a deer, okay, if you examine this deer, well, like a single deer, okay, and you follow it all day long, we'll see what it does, right? You can get a pretty good idea of what it's doing in a day. You can get, this is what deer's doing on a Saturday morning or something, right? You can get a good idea of what an organism's life is like, what it is like, how it interacts with this environment, etc. If you just keep following that one deer all day or something like that, right? But how about look at the bottom picture here? You see like a herd of deer, right? Do you think it's important to be able to actually study how it interacts with other deers? Would it give us a better understanding of the species, how the species behave, or the animal behaves, and seeing how, are these aggressive animals? Are they very cooperative with each other? Do they tag team? Do they not tag team, right? And how closely are they from other herds of deers? Are the herds of deers all one big clump, or they have one here and one in another geographic area, right? So you can see that you can study a living thing on different levels. You can study a living thing at an individual level, and you can study a living thing at a group level, right? So then becomes how you actually, if you want to get the complete picture of an organism, how do you go about getting a complete picture of the organism, right? Okay. So, well, here it is. Okay. So ecologists study, they have organized their thought level, or they have organized the way they study living things in the following manner, okay? First, you can study an animal at an organism at one individual organism level, right? You can bring a frog and dissect it or something. Say one frog. You see one frog, follow it around. Put a microphone on his neck or something like that. See what it squirt. So you can study an organism at an individual level. Then you can study that organism, how it interacts with other species of its kind, the same species, right? How one frog interacts with another frog of the same species, right? Like in this picture, for example, how does the zebra interact with other zebras, right? As you can study. So you can study the zebra. You can study how the zebra interacts with the other zebras, right? And then you can study how the zebra interacts with antelopes. How one species interacts with other species. Okay? It's curious in this picture, right? There's no antelopes in the green grass. If it was my guess, the zebras are kind of like tough dudes, and the antelopes don't want to mess with the zebras. But I don't know nothing about zebras and antelopes. That's just looking at the picture, right? So there is an interaction there. How did they establish that? Correct? So you can study an organism at a organism's level and how it interacts with the members of its own species, and thirdly, how it interacts with members of other species. And finally, how does it interact with other abiotic factors, right? How about the grass? How about the grass? Who shares the water, and what water is available to them, right? You follow? Is it sand or whatever what that is? Abiotic factor is abiotic. And then we look at that tree over there. You know, one day I was doing there. How come there's a tree like one tree in the middle of nowhere, right? It's kind of weird, right? Oh, okay. We have an answer to that potentially, so we're gonna have to be patient. So you can also therefore affect an organism and its abiotic factors. So that's how you recognize, you can organize the study of living things. Now, when you study an individual at an individual level, it's called the study of the individual. But if you're studying a population, the word population in biology, in biological sciences, has a very specific meaning. A population is a group of organisms of the same species which interbreed and live in the same area. Okay, think what I say. Same species like zebras that live and interbreed, they're like families in the same area. Because here's, I don't know, I'm assuming it's like in Africa or something like that. Here's a zebra. This is not like the only herd of zebras, right? There might be another herd like 100 miles away, but they've never met each other, right? So a population is a group of species that interbreed that live in a certain area. It doesn't mean that's the only population, right? There might be many other populations, but its population is one group of species living in a certain area. Now, how members in a population share resources determine how far apart they live. Okay, so now look at this zebra. Okay, now if you notice, if somebody were to study populations of zebras, and you notice that some of them are here and some of them are scattered far away, and then some of them far away, they're for some weird reason very far away, then you wonder why it is that they live so far. Well, how come they just kind of cozy each other, kind of live together, right? But what determines that? What determines that is actually the resources are limited. Because if they all gather on one pond, that pond is going to dry up pretty fast, right? So they have to scatter out to share those resources, okay? So how the population shares the resources determine how far apart they live, different populations. Also, members compete for food, water supply, and mates and other resources. So all these factors determine how close the populations of a certain species live together. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, there are some species that seem smart. Okay, they have special adaptations. Okay. Now listen. It's in the best interest of a population that its members don't compete with each other, right? Because then they, that's the good thing. Then they can live longer. So some species have developed adaptations that reduce competition among members of its population. Members among its population. Okay. For example, if the parents have a different diet, then their babies have a different diet. In other words, parent eats certain food, and the children eat a different type of food. Then there's no competition between the parents and the child. That's a good thing because their diet is different. There's more available for both, right? That's what frogs do. See, in the life cycle of a frog, okay, the children frog, so to speak, the earlier stages of frog, it lives in water. They compete nothing with the adult frogs for their resources. The adult frog lives in land, right? So their diet is different, their environment, so they're not competing with each other. The same species, the same frogs, but when they are toddlers and teenagers, so to speak, they live in a different environment from their adult stage, right? So they have adapted this, and that's good for the survival of the species. That's good for the survival of the species. Another example of a similar phenomenon is the butterfly. Okay, the life cycle of a butterfly includes the caterpillar stage. Now, you've never seen a butterfly chewing away at a leaf, because that's not what butterflies eat. Yeah, caterpillars eat leaves. Butterflies don't eat leaves. Yeah? So here's an organism in two different stages of life with completely different diets, so they're not competing with each other. Okay? So these are some examples of adaptations that reduce competition among species. Now, these are pretty interesting insights, you would say, right? That's what ecologists do. Ecologists study organisms in their environment and give us insights on these things. Okay, so we talked about studying an individual in individual level, and then we talked about studying the individual at population level. Now, there's the third level is something called biological community, okay? A community. A community, a biological community, is interacting populations in a certain area. Okay, here's a population of zebras, and here's a population of antelopes. Okay, together with the grass and the trees and whatever, elephant, whatever, that constitutes a community. A community is a conglomeration, is a environment with different populations. Okay, so zebras by themselves, population of zebras. Antelopes by themselves, our population of antelopes. Zebras plus zebra plus antelope or whatever else populations there are, that's a community. That's called a biological community. So, what's the difference again? Population and community. This is a population, zebras. Zebras, but whatever else, this looks like a giraffe, and I think it looks like a baby elephant. I don't know what that is. And trees, that's a community. Now you can begin to study how one species interacts with other species. That's quite interesting dynamics, actually, sometimes. So now, look at this. So individual, population, okay, community with other organisms. The next term up is ecosystem. See? Ecosystem is all the communities of in a certain area, all the communities, okay, plus the abiotic factors. The communities plus the abiotic factors such as water, temperature, wind and precipitation, etc. If you take the communities plus abiotic factors, that's what's called an ecosystem. Okay, so an ecosystem is a community plus its abiotic factors. Now, if you take a whole bunch of ecosystems from different parts of the world, then you get a biome. Okay, and all the biomes in different parts of the world will give you the biosphere. The biosphere, if you recall, is that part of the earth that sustains life. Okay, so you can organize. It's like cell, tissue, system, organ system, organ systems, and human like that. So this is the level of organization of living things. You can study them at a population, individual level, population level, community level, and ecosystem level, which is communities plus abiotic factors, and combine a few ecosystems together to give you a larger geographic area called a biome, and all the biomes together give you the biosphere. Okay? Now, ecology is the study of organisms, populations, communities, ecosystem, biomes, and biosphere. If you go below this, that's not ecology. That's like histology and anatomy, whatever, And this is like physics, molecular, or chemistry at a molecular level. Beyond the biosphere, you're talking about, I don't know what you're talking about, astrophysics or whatever. You follow? So this is the domain or sphere of study of ecology, or organisms at an individual level up to the biosphere. Okay, organized over here: individuals, population, communities, ecosystems, and biosphere. So now we have talked about ecology, we talked about biospheres, we talked about abiotic factors, right? And so we talked about ecology, what it means. We talked about biosphere, including abiotic and biotic factors. We talked about ecology, studying organisms at individual level, population, community, ecosystem, biosphere. And after a brief pause, we shall study how organisms obtain energy in their ecosystems, inshallah. Until then, as-salatu wa-salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum.